A 16-bit workflow has several advantages for a film and video professional. In order to take advantage of these new, better file formats, you're going to have to harness the power of the Adobe Camera Raw dialog box. This will enable you to unlock and essentially develop those raw files captured by high-end digital still cameras. Let's take a look at how this Camera Raw dialog box works. I have now launched the Adobe Camera Raw dialog box. I've done this by choosing to open a Camera Raw file. This current image was shot with a Nikon camera, and it's in the NEF format, which is Nikon's version of a RAW image. Most manufacturers use their own formats, and it will vary by manufacturer. However, all of the formats are lumped into the category of Camera Raw, or raw camera images. The Camera Raw dialog box will let us do quite a bit to this image, and I'd like to walk you through the general interface. Depending upon which version of Photoshop you have, this dialog box will vary. One of the first things I want to do is come down to the bottom and click to open up the image here and affect some of its presets. Under our workflow option, I can decide what space the image was shot in. Now, it has been tagged as using the Adobe RGB profile, and it's reading that from the camera, so I'll go ahead and leave that as is. Next, we have a depth, and I highly recommend changing this to the 16 bits per channel depth so you can really harness the full color range that the Camera Raw formats support. Next, you have size. This image was shot with a 6 megapixel sensor. I could choose to size the image down within this dialog box or enlarge it. Keep in mind for video graphics, even if you are working in HD, that is only 1920 pixels across by 1080 pixels tall. So this 6 megapixel digital camera captures more than enough images. In fact, I would only need slightly less than 3 megapixels to capture an image suitable for high definition use. I'll just leave this set to the 6 megapixel setting and use this because I can always downsize the image later. Resolution does not really matter. With video graphics, we just measure the total pixel count, so resolution can be ignored. I do have the option of specifying to open this image as a smart object. And if you are working in CS3, I highly encourage you to use smart objects. We'll discuss them in greater depth later in the chapters. I'll click OK. Up top, we have several tools. So if you need to move the image around, zoom in on parts of the image, pan it, etc., you can do that. You can also take the eyedropper here, which will allow you to white balance. I could select the white balance tool, find something that should be white, and click. And notice how the white in the flag is restored and the image is now color balanced. Let's go ahead and zoom back out. I'll hold down the Option key when I click to zoom. There we go. You can, of course, crop as well as rotate. Deal with any red eye if you have it. But let's go ahead and move over to the area here on the right. Our first tab is the Basic tab. This is where you can white balance. We chose a custom white balance by using the white balance tool. You can also adjust the temperature as needed and the tint. But generally, these are set by the white balance tool, but feel free to tweak. We can choose Auto, and the image will attempt to automatically adjust exposure and other properties. I'm going to go ahead and back that down just a little bit so the sky doesn't blow out. You can then make other minor adjustments to the image to enhance the image. There we're adjusting the fill light. Let's back that off a little. You can intensify the blacks and adjust brightness and contrast. Our next category is going to be the curves. This is the tone curve, and by default it shows you a parametric curve. I'm going to go ahead to the point curve, and this will allow me to choose from presets such as strong contrast, which allow me to intensify the dark shadows a little bit. If I want to make the brighter areas pop, I can pull that up. And this allows you to make a curves adjustment to the image. Curves is an adjustment we'll explore in much greater depth later in the book. Our next category is detail, and this allows you to sharpen the image. Sharpening an image too much can introduce grain or noise into the image, so you'll generally want to back that off. Additionally, you can go ahead and adjust luminance to remove noise. You generally need to set the image to a 100% magnification if you want to really accurately judge what's happening. So watch as we adjust sharpening here. You'll see how the detail in the sky gets a little grainy, so let's back that off. Noise reduction can be used to adjust noise in the brightness areas, the luminance, or in the color areas such as the sky. That'll allow us to remove some of the noise. Let's go to the next tab, which is going to be a hue, saturation, luminance adjustment. And this allows you, if necessary, to convert to grayscale or manipulate the different color values within the image. Let's go ahead and move over to the red areas of the image. And if I wanted those to pop, I can go ahead and pull that red slider to intensify the reds. Our next category is split toning, and this will allow you to make adjustments to both the highlights and the shadows. If I would like to intensify the saturation of the brightest areas, I could take the saturation slider over and notice how that intensifies. Now that looks unnatural, so let's back that off to about 5, and we'll play with the hue slider here and see how it's changing the overall color of the sky. Let's set that there so it's just a little bluer. The shadows can also be manipulated, changing the hue as well as the intensity of the shadows. Again, too much and it looks unnatural, so we'll just back that off. Next, you have the lens correction, and this only needs to be used if you need to adjust the vignette. So if you're getting shadow to the image or you want to artificially add a vignette, you can do that by pulling it in, which will darken around the edges. Or inversely, if you're getting a vignette from the camera's lens or hood, you could pull it to a positive number, and it will slightly brighten the edges to compensate for a vignette that's undesirable. Our next category is camera calibration, and this allows you to make adjustments to the camera itself for the different areas, such as the red, green, blue sensors and the shadow value. Generally, the camera profile will be okay. Lastly, we have presets, and this will allow you to store any changes you make as a preset by clicking the new icon at the bottom down here. And this allows you to store the settings so they can be reapplied to other images. Let's go ahead and cancel. If you want to see any warnings about where the shadows are being clipped, we can click these to see areas that are too bright or too dark. Fortunately, with this image, we don't have them. If I want to go full screen, I can click the toggle full screen mode, and it will take the interface full screen, blocking out the rest of Photoshop. When you are set, you have two choices. You can choose that you are done, which will simply store the settings, but will not open the image, or you could choose Open Object, which will update the image and then open it into Photoshop. Let's choose that. Photoshop then processes the image and turns it into an open document. You can then decide to save this document as either a PSD file or a TIFF file. And this will allow you to further process the image in the future.